From the black silence of orbit, we observed. The enemy's war beasts descended upon the human colonies like falling stars of destruction, their limbs tearing through domes, their guttural roars shattering communication arrays and sending shockwaves across the fragile habitats. They were perfect weapons, engineered with cruelty and precision, designed to incite fear and annihilate. And yet, something was wrong. Humans did not panic. They did not scatter. At first, their defenses were almost laughable. Shards of metal hastily stacked into barricades, improvised turrets cobbled from wreckage, and crude traps fashioned from debris. Our sensors flagged these as minor annoyances, insignificant obstacles to the unstoppable tide of our war beasts. We expected chaos, despair, submission. Instead, we found adaptation. Patterns began to emerge, subtle and unnerving. Humans used terrain as a weapon, drawing beasts into narrow canyons, channeling their momentum into pitfalls hidden beneath debris. They stacked materials with a tactical foresight that defied our predictions. Entire colonies became traps in themselves, not by technology alone, but by instinct, by a raw intelligence that seemed to anticipate our every move. Where we expected fear, we saw cunning. Where we predicted retreat, we observed counterattack. Then came the unsettling revelation. Humans were capturing some of our war beasts. At first, it seemed impossible. How could they tame predators built to kill? Yet they did, herding the beasts into containment fields, observing, studying, training. Each day, the creatures moved more fluidly with human direction, striking with coordination that outmatched our expectations. We recalibrated our sensors, only to find ourselves perpetually behind, struggling to predict outcomes already in motion. We watched, horrified and fascinated, as colonies became living fortresses. Humans would lay ambushes, then vanish, leading the beasts into traps that they themselves had prepared. Even wounded, even outnumbered, they displayed a confidence bordering on madness. Every human seemed to possess a spark, a primal, untamable instinct that transformed vulnerability into strength. They were not merely surviving the beasts, they were integrating them into a larger strategy, creating an ecosystem of war where predator and human acted as one. In one particularly grotesque display, a captured beast lunged at a human patrol. We expected carnage. Instead, the humans danced aside, guiding the creature with a combination of gestures, sound, and sheer will. The beast halted, pivoted, and struck an approaching enemy with precision. It was no longer a weapon against humans. It had become a weapon of humans. The realization sent shivers through our analysts. These colonies, these fragile outposts, were not weak. They were incubators of mastery. As we adjusted orbital sensors, we noted the rapid evolution of human tactics.
Each day brought new innovations, traps more elaborate, strategies more devious, defenses more cunning. Every movement was deliberate, every choice calculated. Humans were rewriting the rules of survival in real time. We, species so proud of our dominion over genetics and warfare, were left behind, scrambling to comprehend methods that seemed beyond reason. And yet there was something more terrifying still. The humans did not seem to fear death in the way we did. There was audacity in every maneuver, a willingness to risk annihilation if it meant learning, adapting, and overcoming. Where logic dictated caution, humans acted with instinct sharpened by experience, by culture, by something ineffable. Their colonies pulsed with life even amidst carnage, thriving amidst destruction, turning chaos into a tool rather than a threat. We attempted containment strategies, recalibrated our predictions, unleashed more war beasts, more devastation. And still, humans adapted, learning faster than any algorithm, anticipating attacks we had not yet conceived. The battlefield had shifted, imperceptibly but irrevocably. The beasts we had sent to destroy became shields, scouts, allies, and we, the observers, could only record, awestruck, the unfolding spectacle. By the time we fully comprehended the scale of human mastery, the truth was undeniable. We had misjudged them. The war beasts we engineered for terror were now instruments of human will, coordinated, disciplined, and terrifyingly effective. Where we saw animals, humans saw tools. Where we saw chaos, they saw opportunity. And as we watched from orbit, hearts, if our species could be said to have hearts, tightened with unease. Humans were something else entirely, not merely resilient, not merely clever, something more, something we could not control, something that reminded us, in the stark cold of space, that survival was never about strength alone. It was about ingenuity, audacity, and the terrifying, untamable spark of life that we, in our hubris, had assumed we understood. And then, just as we began to adjust our strategies to counter their newfound mastery, a patrol vanished, silent, invisible, yet leaving behind a war beast turned against our own. The signal faded. Our analysts whispered in disbelief. The humans were moving beyond comprehension. We had unleashed them, and now we were unsure if we could ever contain them. From the cold void above their planets, we watched as the hive descended. Wave after wave of coordinated assault ships, their movements flawless, their purpose unmistakable. Annihilation. The precision of their strikes was terrifying. Settlements shattered, orbital defenses neutralized, communication arrays gutted before any response could even be calculated. Every movement, every deployment had the meticulous logic of a single consciousness, the hive mind. And yet, for all their coordination, for all their terrifying efficiency, the humans did not panic. We expected chaos.
We expected scatter, screams, surrender. Instead, we found strategy. They twisted the very landscape to their advantage. Rivers were rerouted to flood approaches. Canyons collapsed under controlled detonations, crushing the vanguard of the hive before it could reach settlement walls. Living metal, engineered in secret laboratories on a scale no alien species had dared, rose from the ground, forming walls, barricades, and labyrinthine fortresses that guided attackers into traps of their own making. Humans moved as if anticipating the hive's every impulse, each response faster, sharper, and more effective than predicted. Our sensors strained to keep pace, yet every calculation failed to match their instinctual genius. Even their biological engineering defied comprehension. Predators from untamed wilds, creatures we assumed incapable of discipline, were reshaped by human hands into sentinels, scouts, and hunters. They moved silently through forests and canyons, crippling hive operations without a sound. One moment a hive strike would reach a settlement, the next it would vanish, neutralized by an unseen predator, guided by humans who seemed to know its mind as well as their own. Every incursion faced a counter that was increasingly sophisticated, each more terrifying than the last. And then came the children. The young, barely trained in combat, demonstrated an instinctual understanding of warfare that outstripped anything our simulations could model. They anticipated ambushes, exploited weaknesses in high formation, and executed maneuvers that made seasoned commanders gape in disbelief. It was as if survival had been etched into their DNA, their very culture, their instincts amplified by a determination that bordered on the preternatural. Even as fleets of hive vessels close in, these children, no older than the time it took a war beast to mature, altered the battlefield simply by being present, a living unpredictability no alien algorithm could counter. The psychological warfare was more unsettling still. Humans learned to exploit the hive's own limitations, orchestrating feints and false retreats to scatter the collective consciousness. A swarm would strike one sector, only to find the area empty. In another, an ambush would appear, drawing forces into deadly traps. The hive hesitated, fractured, momentarily unsure, and humans capitalized ruthlessly. Every human colony, once assumed fragile and inconsequential, transformed into a fortress of improvisation. Where we expected panic and disorder, we found coordination, anticipation, and audacity. Our analysts whispered among themselves as we watched. The hive suffered defeat after defeat, each loss not by brute force, but by a combination of ingenuity, intuition, and audacity that no alien species had ever demonstrated. Humans were rewriting the rules of survival before our very eyes. Every misstep we attributed to our own strategy was merely a misjudgment of their capacity.
Every victory they achieved seemed preordained, as if human cunning could bend probability itself to their will. We observed a particularly devastating sequence of attacks on the colony of T'Kresh Prime. The hive's assault force struck with overwhelming numbers, expecting the settlement to crumble in hours. Instead, humans lured the main battalion into a canyon, detonating strategic collapses that trapped entire units. While the bulk of the swarm struggled to free themselves, humans emerged from hidden bunkers, directing predator allies with precision. Missiles and biological attacks turned inward upon the immobilized hive units. By the time the dust settled, the battlefield bore more evidence of hive destruction than human casualties, and still not one human retreated. We noted their adaptability. Hive strategies repeated themselves, yet humans adjusted faster than we could anticipate. If one colony was targeted with aerial bombardment, the next would anticipate the pattern, setting countermeasures even before the strike began. Tactics we believed impossible, anticipating an alien collective mind with near-perfect prediction, were executed effortlessly. Humans were not only learning, they were evolving on the battlefield, turning our own assumptions into weaknesses. And the most terrifying aspect was their calm. Amidst chaos, humans moved with purpose. They coordinated, communicated, and executed plans in ways that seemed effortless, a symphony of improvisation that confounded our rigid logic. They were not reacting, they were dictating. Every strike they repelled, every attack they orchestrated, was both lesson and warning. Underestimate them, and it would be fatal. We began to realize the scope of what we had witnessed. These humans, whose colonies we had assumed fragile, whose numbers we thought easily overwhelmed, were crafting survival into an art form. The hive, with its collective intelligence and coordinated assaults, was being undone not by numbers, nor by brute force, but by ingenuity, instinct, and audacity. Every attack, every defense, revealed more layers of sophistication, more depth of strategy, and more terrifying evidence that human survival was not a matter of chance, it was inevitability. And yet, even as we documented the brilliance of their defenses, a deeper unease settled over our fleets. Humans were not only surviving, they were teaching themselves to anticipate, to manipulate, to turn every threat into advantage. Every feint, every trap, every unpredictable maneuver left the hive vulnerable in ways we could not have foreseen. From orbit, we watched the humans disappear into the landscape, their colonies becoming ghostly fortresses, their allies silent, their strategies lethal. The hive regrouped, hesitant, confused, each wave weaker than the last, and as we recorded their next move, a flicker of movement caught our sensors, a human scout slipping between units, unseen, untouched, ready to strike.
The hive, for all its unity, hesitated, and in that moment, clarity struck us with unbearable weight. Underestimating humans was not merely a miscalculation, it was a fatal error. The scout vanished, the next wave approached, and the humans were already waiting. In the vast emptiness between stars, we watched, helpless, as humans redefined the battlefield itself. Their colonies, scattered across barren worlds and wild terrains, became laboratories of survival, arenas where ingenuity and instinct fused into something beyond comprehension. They reached out, not merely to each other, but to the alien fauna and predators of their environments, creatures that evolution had designed for dominance, for fear, for death, were drawn into human schemes, transformed into allies and weapons with a subtlety and precision that defied logic. We observed a predator native to the deserts of Virel Prime, its fangs capable of shredding armored suits, moving through the dunes with terrifying speed. Alone, it would have been unstoppable. Yet humans approached it, not with guns or nets, but with gestures, signals, tones that carried meaning beyond our comprehension. In minutes, they had aligned its instincts with their own, guiding it toward hive patrols. It struck not blindly, but as though guided by a single will shared with its human handlers. Across the battlefield, similar alliances unfolded, predators acting as sentinels, prey becoming scouts, birds and swarming insects carrying signals and traps between human units. Every alliance multiplied human tactical options exponentially, fracturing our assumptions, invalidating our predictions. Even our most sophisticated biotechnologies seemed crude in comparison. Humans took what was wild, what was considered untamable, and incorporated it seamlessly into strategies that combined technology, biology, and instinct. Machines moved with living creatures. Beasts and humans coordinated as one. A scout drone would glide ahead, marking enemy positions, while a beast launched a surprise strike. Behind them, human soldiers executed maneuvers perfectly synchronized with both. Observing these patterns from orbit, we recognized choreography,
artificial in design, yet organic in execution, something no alien intellect could fully anticipate. We attempted countermeasures, deploying new strike units, redirecting predator killers, releasing chemical deterrents, but humans adapted faster than any algorithm could calculate. If we anticipated one alliance, they had already formed another, exploiting environmental advantages, terrain features, even weather systems. A canyon that seemed impassable became a trap for high forces. A river swollen by engineered floods carried beasts and humans in tandem to strike enemy flanks. Every step, every gesture was calculated to amplify their advantage, yet it appeared instinctual, effortless, inevitable. Our analysts murmured in disbelief.
The human approach was neither brute force nor mere cleverness. It was audacity incarnate. They did not simply survive threats, they transformed them into assets, integrating danger into opportunity. A hive unit chasing what we assumed to be human vulnerability would find itself entangled, immobilized by creatures we had dismissed as insignificant. A predator might drive an enemy into a trap of electrified terrain, while humans simultaneously executed a tactical strike from a concealed vantage. Across the battlefield, humans turned chaos into structure, threat into strategy, turning the laws of war as we knew them upside down. And yet, for all their ingenuity, they did not seek conquest. Their goal was survival, defense, protection of what was theirs. Each colony was a fortress not built of walls alone, but of cunning, adaptability, and alliances that no alien species could replicate. In one stunning display, a young human coordinated a pack of predators to herd rogue hive scouts into a canyon, then used the terrain to amplify a controlled avalanche. Hive units that had once believed in their superiority fell with near ritual precision, one after another, while the humans orchestrating the maneuver remained untouched, watching and calculating the next move. Humans embraced danger not as deterrent, but as catalyst. Every threat became a teacher, every failure a blueprint for adaptation. Machines, beasts, and humans moved with a unity that was both terrifying and beautiful, each element responding with perfect timing, each step a statement. Survival was theirs to master, and the impossible was theirs to conquer. From orbit, even the most cautious among our observers admitted it. Fear. Humans were not just surviving the hive, they were mastering it, reshaping the rules of engagement, turning every battlefield into a proving ground for ingenuity and courage. Their colonies pulsed with life, a symphony of movement and instinct, each alliance reinforcing the next, each action more unpredictable than the last. And in the silence between the stars, as a hive wave approached another settlement, we realized that our instruments could not anticipate the next strike. Humans had become more than clever. They had become unknowable. Every alliance, every creature, every gesture was a potential threat, and every human they guided into battle carried with them the certainty of adaptation, the inevitability of survival. As we recalibrated our sensors, attempting to track the movements of beasts and soldiers alike, a single human scout emerged on the horizon, flanked by predators twice her size, signaling for the next maneuver. The hive hesitated, confused, unable to process the coordination it now faced. And in that pause, a new reality crystallized across our fleets. Humans were no longer reacting to the universe. They were bending it to their will. We watched, we feared, and the scout vanished, leading a new alliance, unseen, unstoppable, into the darkness.
The humans were not merely surviving, they were mastering the impossible. Exira Prime had always been unremarkable. A modest colony on the edge of human-settled space, it was little more than a network of domes, rudimentary mining stations, and scattered settlements clinging to a planet's arid surface. From orbit, we marked it as insignificant, a target to be swept aside in hours by our forces, a minor victory in the endless catalog of conquest. Yet what we found was something far more formidable than we had anticipated. When the alien armada descended, their ships slicing through the atmosphere like shards of black crystal, they expected fear, chaos, surrender. Instead, they were met with a resistance that seemed almost supernatural. Humans had transformed the colony into a living weapon. Trenches and barricades were not mere defenses, they were ambush zones, layered with traps, decoys, and channels that funneled our forces into lethal corridors. From orbit, the settlement resembled a beating organism, each light a neuron, each movement a signal in a vast, adaptive network. We unleashed our first wave, confident in our superiority. They met us with what we expected to be disorganized fire.
Instead, the humans exploited every weakness in our formations. Missiles were redirected into minefields we had assumed harmless. Energy weapons bounced off reflective surfaces with calculated precision, striking ships in ways no algorithm could have predicted. Rogue weather systems, artificially manipulated, transformed clouds and wind into tactical advantages, obscuring human movement while battering our strike formations. It was as if the planet itself had become an ally, reshaped by human cunning into a fortress of survival. Human ingenuity went beyond terrain. They commandeered derelict war machines, abandoned or damaged units from prior skirmishes, and reprogrammed them mid-battle. Our own weapons turned against us with devastating efficiency, their trajectories guided by human intent. Boarding parties found themselves facing both humans and the automated machines they now commanded, traps waiting for every step. Even the smallest human citizen, children, scavengers, engineers, acted with purpose, moving seamlessly through combat zones to repair, reposition, and counterattack with an instinctual understanding of battlefield dynamics that confounded our best tactical simulations. The alien commanders, confident in numerical superiority, faltered. Every advantage we believed guaranteed victory became a liability. We attempted to coordinate strikes, to overwhelm with fleet numbers, to crush resistance before humans could respond, but each wave was intercepted, misdirected, or turned back by strategies we could not anticipate. Every loss on our side became a lesson in the adaptability of their mind, and we began to see that their resilience was not just a matter of courage, it was a fundamental adaptation of their culture, biology, and collective instinct.
From the front lines, the human spirit manifested physically in every trench, every improvised turret, every barricade fashioned from rubble. They fought not only with technology, but with creativity, audacity, and sheer instinct. Boarding attacks were coordinated with counter-ambushes, traps timed to perfection, and even negotiations with rogue predators, local fauna trained to act as scouts or enforcers, to tip the balance. They turned the planet into a chessboard, and we were always 2 steps behind. We observed one particularly devastating engagement in the northern sector. A squad of elite human soldiers, no more than 20 in number, lured an entire battalion of hive-aligned creatures into a canyon, collapsing it with precise detonations. Dozens of creatures perished, yet not a single human fell. From the chaos, the survivors executed a counterattack that destroyed half of the enemy support units, commandeering armored units abandoned in the wreckage. The operation was meticulous, precise, and devastatingly effective. From orbit, we struggled to comprehend how such a small force could dismantle a superior one so completely. Even more unsettling were the humans' use of improvisation. We observed a technician manipulate a broken communications array to feed false data into our surveillance networks. Simultaneously, children guided predatory creatures along pre-planned routes, channeling them into hive units, while engineers sabotaged energy conduits. It was not only strategy, it was choreography, a symphony of motion and intent, each participant, machine, and creature contributing to a lethal whole. Our fleets, expecting to overwhelm, found themselves trapped in calculated unpredictability, exposed to dangers they could not anticipate. The siege stretched on. Hours became days, days became weeks, and still, humans adapted, improved, and learned. Every loss of life was recorded, analyzed, and used to refine tactics. Every victory became a blueprint for the next. By the time the alien armada began to falter, Xera Prime had transformed from a modest colony into a fortress of unparalleled ingenuity, a place reshaped and hardened by the very forces that intended its destruction. From orbit, we could see it all, Colonies' lights flickering like neurons firing in unison, explosions timed with surgical precision, movements coordinated across miles of hostile terrain. The humans were not simply defending, they were orchestrating survival. Rogue predators patrolled sectors like living sentinels, mines detonated with impeccable timing, hijacked war machines struck where we least expected. Even our most sophisticated algorithms failed to predict their next move. The culmination of the siege was breathtaking. A massive assault fleet approached the central dome, expecting to overwhelm the remaining human defenders. Instead, they were funneled into a valley where hidden emplacements, predator allies, and repurposed machines waited.
A storm, artificially manipulated, obscured incoming sensors, masking the true extent of human fortifications. Strike after strike faltered. The Armada's precision crumbled beneath a torrent of improvisation and audacity that was uniquely human. When the dust finally settled, what remained was more than a colony standing. It was a statement. Xera Prime had endured, had been tested, reshaped, and hardened by every blow. It was proof that humans were more than survivors. They were masters of adaptation, ingenuity, and resilience. Every trench, every wall, every improvised turret bore witness to a species that would endure against the impossible. And as we withdrew to report back to our fleets, the final human counterattack struck a squadron we had assumed invincible,
tearing it apart with precision we could not comprehend. From orbit, we realized something terrifying. Xera Prime was not just a fortress, it was a declaration. Humans had survived what no other species could, and even in the silence after the siege, we knew they would never yield, that their tenacity was not just physical, but instinctive, cultural, and inexhaustible. We could only watch, recording the devastation, the brilliance, the audacity, and we wondered, for the first time, if the galaxy itself would ever be able to contain such a species. The first signs were subtle, almost imperceptible. A reconnaissance drone that had been tracking human movements vanished mid-flight, its signal abruptly cut, as if it had never existed. A comm array transmitting coordinates to our strike forces emitted only static for hours. At first, we attributed these anomalies to human error, technical failures, or the chaos of war. But soon patterns emerged, deliberate, methodical, and terrifyingly effective. Humans were no longer defending, they were hunting. Our war beasts, once instruments of fear, were no longer tools under our control. They had become extensions of human ingenuity, herded and guided into positions that amplified chaos against our own forces. A horde that had been unleashed to annihilate a colony would appear at the edge of our fleet, striking ships in ways that could only be described as coordinated. Entire squadrons vanished into ambushes we had not even conceived. From orbit, we watched as humans, predators, and reprogrammed machines moved as one, executing strikes with precision that defied reason. Their methods were not brute force. We expected overwhelming assault, numbers, firepower, destruction. Instead, humans employed clever subversion, psychological warfare, and environmental manipulation. Missiles were redirected into preset traps. Swarm attacks were funneled into terrain shaped by human foresight. Even weather systems, wind, storms, dust, were harnessed to disrupt our formations. They weaponized the battlefield itself, using every possible advantage, anticipating every standard tactic we deployed. Colonies became laboratories of war, each a hub of innovation.
Every detail mattered. A ruined structure could serve as cover, a canyon could conceal ambushes, a river could channel predators into hive patrols. There were no small risks, and every action was calculated with deadly precision. Even minor disruptions, scattered debris, noise, or false trails, were tools to manipulate our perception and lure our units into traps. Humans treated chaos not as a threat, but as material to be molded, a canvas on which they painted strategy and cunning. From our vantage, it was as if nature itself had conspired with them. Predators we had engineered for terror now acted in concert with human soldiers. A single human could lead dozens of these beasts, each acting in coordination to disrupt, disable, and destroy. Our systems, our sensors, algorithms, simulations could not keep pace. Where we anticipated fear, humans exploited aggression. Where we predicted retreat, they created opportunity. Every countermeasure we deployed was already anticipated, already incorporated into the next human maneuver. And yet, for all this ruthless efficiency, there was something deeply human. In the midst of carnage, we observed purpose, morality, and even moments of restraint that lent a terrifying elegance to their actions. They did not slaughter indiscriminately. They struck with precision, minimizing waste, conserving strength, and exploiting opportunities in ways that suggested not only strategy, but understanding. Their victories were measured, their movements deliberate, and the very audacity of their coordination inspired awe and dread in equal measure. We began to see a pattern across battlefields. Recon squads would vanish, only to reappear leaving hive units into preset kill zones. Colonies under siege became staging grounds, not for survival, but for the orchestration of ambushes that could cripple entire fleets. Human ingenuity turned every disadvantage into a weapon, every risk into a strategy. Even our psychological superiority, our expectation that humans would panic, scatter, or fail, was weaponized against us. They anticipated our assumptions, subverted our calculations, and turned expectation into vulnerability. In one particularly striking instance, a small human team used environmental manipulation to devastating effect. They lured a battalion of hive units into a canyon where explosive charges had been strategically positioned. The detonation blocked escape routes, while predators guided by human handlers cut off the rear. Simultaneously, energy weapons fired from concealed turrets struck from unexpected angles. What should have been a minor skirmish turned into a catastrophic loss for our forces, executed with such elegance and foresight that our commanders struggled to comprehend how a handful of humans could dismantle a superior contingent.
Their tactics were iterative, adaptive. Every failed attack, every casualty became a lesson, feeding into the next maneuver.
Even young humans, barely trained, displayed an instinctual understanding of battlefield dynamics that far surpassed our calculations. They reacted not just to present threats, but to potential futures, adjusting strategies dynamically as if they could see the battlefield unfold in multiple timelines simultaneously. Our systems, designed for predictive modeling, were overwhelmed. Algorithms faltered. Fleet movements collided with traps and counterattacks. Every advance we made was anticipated, neutralized, or turned against us. And then came the psychological shift. The hunters became the hunted. Where we expected humans to retreat, they struck forward with precision. Where we assumed dominance, they orchestrated chaos. Our forces faltered under the relentless ingenuity of a species that embraced danger, not as a deterrent, but as a catalyst. The very weapons we deployed, the tactics we relied upon, became part of their strategy. Our own designs turned against us. From orbit, we watched fleets crumble under invisible hands. Strike units vanished, swallowed by terrain we had considered inert. Energy weapons overloaded when routed through reflective surfaces or channeled through human-engineered traps. Even our war beasts, previously instruments of terror, now acted as hunters for humans, guided with terrifying efficiency against our own units. What had once been an advantage, what had once seemed an unstoppable force, was now exploited, repurposed, and deployed with precision we could not anticipate. There was no mercy, but there was method. Humans struck to create outcomes, to dictate the flow of battle, to shape the environment and the enemy into instruments of their strategy. Each move was intentional, each action a statement of adaptability. They were not merely surviving, they were controlling, commanding, reshaping the war itself. Our casualties mounted, systems failed, communications faltered, fleet cohesion dissolved under relentless unpredictability. And in the midst of this, a chilling realization spread across our command. Humans were not reactive. They were creators of outcomes, architects of chaos, and manipulators of events in a manner that inspired both awe and fear. For the first time in recorded history, we felt the weight of underestimating a species that refused to yield. The final moment of clarity came when a human strike team, no more than 20 strong, emerged from the remnants of a devastated colony. They moved as one, directing predators and reprogrammed war machines, drawing an entire battalion of our forces into a canyon where every escape route was sealed. The ambush was executed flawlessly. From orbit, we watched the destruction unfold, helpless, as our forces were shredded, and the humans emerged virtually unscathed, already preparing the next strike. It was then we understood. The hunters had become the hunted. The species we believed to be prey had become predator. The battlefield, once ours to command, had been turned against us, and every move we made was anticipated, manipulated, and neutralized. For the first time, we felt genuine fear. Humans had stopped merely surviving. They were now masters of the hunt, and we were the quarry. When the dust settled across shattered colonies and fractured battlefields, the humans remained. Their domes were scorched, trenches filled with debris, and wreckage littered the plains like shattered bones, but still they endured. Numbers had dwindled, scars marked every settlement, and yet their eyes burned with the same unyielding spirit, a spark that no carnage, no siege, no weapon could extinguish. From our vantage in orbit, we recorded them, small figures against the expanse of ruin, but the scale of their resilience was monumental. They rebuilt, swiftly, decisively, repurposing wreckage into fortifications, scavenging broken war machines into functional weapons, and weaving together fractured colonies into a coherent network. Human engineers and leaders moved through the ruins like conductors of an orchestra, restoring what had been destroyed and innovating solutions that no alien system could have anticipated. They healed not only physical wounds but cultural ones, preserving morale, traditions, and identity even as devastation raged around them. Every gesture, every repaired turret, every rebuilt habitat carried the weight of survival, not just a desire to exist, but an instinct to thrive.
From our perspective, this was more than mere endurance. It was evolution in motion. Every decision, every adaptation, every improvisation seemed to refine the species itself. Where logic predicted collapse, humans advanced, turning chaos into opportunity, weakness into strength. They were not reactive, they were transformative, shaping both environment and circumstance to their advantage. Their biology, culture, and ingenuity fused into a force that no alien intelligence could fully model. Leaders moved among them, not as tyrants demanding obedience, but as visionaries directing with courage, calculation, and empathy. They coordinated reconstruction, redeployed survivors, and integrated lessons from every engagement, every ambush, every failure. Their authority was not imposed, it was earned, grounded in the mutual recognition of skill, tenacity, and instinct. From orbit, we observed these leaders not with fear of hierarchy, but with awe of capability. No command protocol, no AI system, no hive mind could replicate the adaptive wisdom demonstrated in these moments. Even in the quiet aftermath, humans displayed the uncanny ability to anticipate threats, to plan for contingencies, to turn observation into action. Colonies pulsed with activity. Scouts ventured beyond ruined perimeters to reclaim lost ground. Engineers tested reprogrammed war machines, and soldiers trained relentlessly, even as they bore the scars of the previous battles.
It was as if survival itself had become an art form, and every human participated in perfecting it. Our historians, recording these events, would later debate whether the human survival and victories were the result of biology, ingenuity, or sheer audacity. The truth, from where we watched, was clear. They were extraordinary. Not because they wielded superior weapons or commanded larger fleets, but because they turned destruction into opportunity, fear into motivation, and vulnerability into a weapon. Every challenge, every loss, every setback became a foundation for mastery. And the fear we felt was not blind terror, it was recognition, profound and undeniable. Humans were not merely a species to be fought, they were a species to be understood, admired, and if necessary, feared. Their presence in the galaxy was a pivot point, a disruption to assumptions long held by those who had charted the stars and cataloged life. Where once strategy and dominance seemed absolute, humans demonstrated that adaptability, audacity, and instinct could overturn even the most rigid systems. We could see the change ripple through our fleets. Calculations that once seemed infallible faltered. Tactics that had succeeded against every other species failed here. Every victory humans had achieved forced reassessment, and every surviving colony reminded us of what we had underestimated. In our archives, the data accumulated, but comprehension lagged behind observation. The humans themselves seemed to anticipate this, thriving in spaces where understanding lagged, where predictability failed. By the time our forces retreated, a collective unease settled among our fleets. Not merely caution or concern, but something heavier, recognition. Humans were a force that could not be ignored. Not merely adaptive, not merely resilient, but capable of reshaping every expectation, every assumption, every calculation. Their ingenuity, courage, and audacity had changed the balance of power, not through conquest, but through survival, mastery, and the audacious ability to thrive against the impossible. As we left the ruins of their colonies, the galaxy itself seemed altered. The presence of humans had shifted calculations, strategies, and perceptions. The species we had once considered prey had revealed a scope of potential that defied precedent. We could only wonder, as we observed them tending to ruins, reconstructing settlements, and planning for the next unknown threat, what they might accomplish next. Freed from the limitations that constrained us, unbound by the fear that binds so many civilizations, humans existed as both an enigma and a warning, adaptable, relentless, and extraordinary. And so, we recorded, we observed, and we acknowledged the truth. In a universe of predictable outcomes, humans were an anomaly. They endured where logic predicted annihilation, triumphed where expectation demanded failure, and emerged not simply as survivors, but as masters of survival itself. The galaxy would never again underestimate